Okay, get ready, because we are diving into some serious stuff today, folks. Earth's disaster cycle.
Yeah.
You know that article you sent over on natural disasters? Turns out it might not be so random after all.
Right.
We're talking patterns, we're talking cycles, like some real uh, wild stuff possibly in store for us down the line.
Yeah, and to help us break it all down, we're looking at the work of Ben Davidson.
Okay?
He's a space weather expert, and he suggests that the Earth, well, it goes through these repeating cycles of major disasters. And the big drivers, magnetic fields and, get this, our own sun.
It's kind of mind-blowing to think about, right? Like that these huge events could be part of some bigger pattern, you know?
Uh-huh.
But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's break it down. What are these cycles all about?
One number really stuck out to me from the article, 12,000 years. 12,000 years. Yeah, 12,000 years is a very significant time frame when we're talking about, well, the Earth's history. And for good reason. See, scientists, they've found evidence that roughly every 12,000 years, the Earth goes through something called a geomagnetic excursion. It's kind of like the Earth's magnetic poles decide to go on a little walkabout.
A walkabout with consequences,
Yeah.
right? The article mentioned our magnetic field weakening during these excursions.
Absolutely. Imagine the Earth's magnetic field as this, well, this protective shield around the planet, right?
Okay,
It deflects harmful radiation from the sun.
right.
Now, during a geomagnetic excursion, the shield doesn't just vanish, but it does weaken,
Hmm.
and a weaker shield. Well, that leaves us more vulnerable to all that activity coming from the sun.
Okay, so not ideal. But how does this affect us today? I mean, this all sounds a bit like ancient history, right?
Well, here's the thing. Scientists, they're observing that the Earth's magnetic poles, they're moving, and they're moving faster than usual.
Oh.
And this acceleration, it suggests we might be in the very beginning stages of a geomagnetic excursion right now.
Wait, hold on. So we're not just talking about some distant event from way back when.
Yeah.
This could actually impact us in our lifetime.
It's a very real possibility, yeah. And it's not just the shifting poles we need to worry about. It's this increased vulnerability to, well, they're called solar storms.
Solar storms. Okay, paint me a picture. What are we talking? Like a bunch of solar flares going off at once or something?
In essence, yeah. Think of solar storms as these massive bursts of energy from the sun.
Okay.
And remember that weakened magnetic field we were talking about?
Yeah.
When a solar storm hits Earth during a period of weakened magnetic defenses, the effects are amplified.
Okay, now you're making me nervous. This is giving me some bad vibes, especially after reading about the Carrington Event.
Oh, yeah, the Carrington Event.
Yeah.
A major solar storm that hit Earth back in 1859. It's a prime example of how powerful these events can actually be. Now, even with the limited technology back then, the Carrington Event still managed to fry telegraph systems across the globe.
Wow.
Imagine a storm of that magnitude happening today.
Yeah. Without reliance on technology, it'd be total chaos, right?
At the very least, we're talking about a potential collapse of power grids, widespread communication outages, no more GPS, and it wouldn't be an inconvenience for a few hours. The effects could last for years. Imagine no internet, no reliable electricity, no way to coordinate relief efforts.
Okay, so no internet is definitely a downer.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we're talking about consequences way beyond just our iPhones going dark, right? The article hinted at some pretty dire scenarios like
Yeah.
societal collapse, that kind of thing.
And that's because the potential consequences of a major solar storm hitting our tech-dependent world, well, they are far-reaching. I mean, we rely so heavily on these intricate systems for everything: food distribution, healthcare, everything,
Yeah.
all interconnected, all vulnerable to disruption.
So it's like a domino effect. One system goes down, and then it triggers a whole cascade of failures in others. I don't know, it's easy to feel kind of helpless thinking about all that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a natural reaction, for sure. But we have to remember that while the consequences could be really serious, they're not insurmountable. Humans have weathered these storms before, literally. And this time around, we have something our ancestors didn't. We've got foresight.
That's right. We're not going into this blind. We're talking about it. We're aware of the risks, and hopefully that awareness will, it'll spark action. But what kind of action can we actually take?
Well, the article you shared, it mentioned some practical steps. One of the biggest ones is location, location, location.
Like where we choose to live.
Exactly. If you're concerned about the potential impacts of these events, higher ground, far away from the coastlines, that's ideal. Coastal areas, way more vulnerable to tsunamis, rising sea levels, lower elevations, you're looking at a higher risk of flooding.
So like the Rocky Mountains, for example. The article seemed to point in that direction a little.
They're onto something there, for sure. The Rocky Mountains are often mentioned as a potentially safer zone. Their elevation, the distance from coastlines, it offers a degree of natural protection. Now, I'm not saying everyone needs to pack their bags and head for the hills right this second, but, it's something to consider when we talk about long-term planning. Resilience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm guessing relocating isn't really feasible for everyone, right?
Yeah.
What about the rest of us? The ones who aren't quite ready to embrace, mountain life just yet? What other options are out there?
That's where self-sufficiency comes in. The more we can do to provide for ourselves, the less reliant we become on those vulnerable systems we were talking about. So we're talking about, securing access to essential resources, food, water.
Like stocking up on canned goods and bottled water, like that kind of prepping.
That's part of it, yeah. But it can be bigger than that, too. Ever heard of permaculture gardening?
I've heard the term, but I can't say I know much about it.
So permaculture gardening, it's a way of designing these agricultural systems. And they're actually modeled after natural ecosystems, so they're way more sustainable, more resilient. They can provide a consistent food supply even if disruptions happen.
Wow, that's fascinating. I'm starting to realize this isn't just about bracing for disaster, is it? It's about using this knowledge to create a more sustainable, more resilient way of life,
Yeah.
even beyond the potential threats we're discussing here.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And it's not just about individual preparedness either. We need to think bigger, think communities. Imagine if more communities were equipped to generate their own power, manage their own food and water resources. The impact of a large-scale disaster, it would be minimized significantly.
It kind of paints a hopeful picture, doesn't it? Not just surviving, but actually thriving.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about location self-sufficiency, but what about the big one? Technology. What do we do about that?
Yeah, that's a big one, and there's no easy answer, unfortunately. But just being aware of those vulnerabilities, that's a good first step. We can explore alternative energy solutions, things like off-grid solar power systems. Or we can learn those more traditional skills, how to preserve food without refrigeration, how to navigate without a GPS, those things.
It's interesting, right? So much of this comes back to rediscovering those skills, those practices that our ancestors relied on for centuries. It's like we've come full circle. But there's one thing that's still bugging me. We've talked about the how, the why of these cycles, but what about the when?
Ah, the million-dollar question. Well, we can't predict these events with, perfect certainty.
Because even with these cycles, nature has a way of throwing curveballs, right?
Exactly. But here's the thing. The more we understand the patterns, the more we pay attention to those signs, the better equipped we'll be to anticipate, to prepare for whatever might be coming.
So it's about knowledge, preparedness, and maybe even a little bit of watching the skies.
You could say that, but you know what? There's another layer to all this, a really fascinating one, I think. Remember how you mentioned that 12,000-year cycle, how it just kind of stuck with you?
Oh, yeah. Hard to ignore a number like that.
Yeah.
It feels significant, like a countdown timer,
And maybe there's more to that feeling than we realize. See, it's not just scientific data that points to these recurring cycles. There are ancient myths, stories from all over the world, and they seem to echo those same timelines.
Wait, are you saying that ancient civilizations, they might have known about these cycles? Like they experienced these events too?
It's a real possibility, and some researchers are taking it very seriously.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, right? If these ancient civilizations knew about these cycles, what can we learn from them? What wisdom did they have that we've lost along the way?
Now, that's a question. We've gone from solar storms and prepping supplies to ancient myths and lost civilizations. This is why I love these deep dives. The more you learn, the more you realize, the more you realize you don't know. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that last bit. It's wild to think, that ancient civilizations might have faced these same things, these cycles of disaster. And I mean, if they did, what did they figure out? What secrets did they have to survive?
Right.
Or even just to be resilient? I mean, we could learn a lot from that, right?
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? We like to think we're so advanced, but maybe we've overlooked some wisdom from the past. Wisdom that could really help us now as we deal with all this uncertainty about the future.
So how do we even start to look for those lost insights? It's like we've opened up a whole other mystery here.
That's the beauty of it. There are people out there, researchers and explorers, they're piecing together these clues from archaeology, from old texts, even the way ancient structures are aligned. It's like a giant puzzle that spans, thousands of years. But I think even without all the answers, just the search, just thinking about it, it changes how we see things. It reminds us that we're part of something much bigger.
That's a good point. It's humbling when you think about these cycles happening for, like, thousands of years. Makes our everyday worries seem kind of small, don't you think?
It definitely puts things in perspective. And I think that shift in perspective, realizing we're part of this larger story, that might be the most valuable thing we take away from all of this.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on Earth's disaster cycle,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want our listeners to walk away with? What should they really remember from all of this?
Knowledge is power. The more we understand these cycles, understand the forces that shape our planet, shape our lives even, the better decisions we can make. It's not about being scared or panicking, it's about awareness, resilience, and maybe even a little awe for this amazing planet we get to call home.
Perfectly said. And on that note, we'll leave you all with those big questions to ponder. If you're looking to dive even deeper into any of this, don't forget to check out our show notes for all those links and resources. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and most importantly, stay curious.